General Audience, Pope Francis. Library of the Apostolic Palace, Wednesday, 3rd June 2020, 5th Catechesis on Prayer. The Prayer of Abraham. Dear brothers and sisters, good morning. There is a voice that suddenly resonates in Abraham's life. A voice that invites him to undertake a journey that he knows is absurd. A voice that spurs him to uproot himself from his homeland, from his family roots, in order to move towards a new, different future. And it is all based on a promise in which he needs only to have trust. And to have trust in a promise is not easy. It takes courage, and Abraham had trust. The Bible is silent on the steps of the first patriarch. The logic of things leaves us to presume that he had worshipped other divinities. Perhaps he was a wise man, accustomed to observing the heavens and the stars. The Lord, in fact, promised him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars that speckle the sky. And Abraham sets out. He listened to the voice of God and trusts in His word. This is important. The trust the word of God. He trusts the word of God. And with his departure, and with this departure of his, a new way of understanding the relationship with God arose. It is for this reason that the patriarch Abraham is present in the great Jewish, Christian and Islamic spiritual traditions as the perfect man of God, capable of being submissive to Him, even when His will proves arduous, if not completely incomprehensible. Abraham is thus the man of the word. When God speaks, man becomes the receptor of that word, and his life the place in which it seeks to become flesh. This is a great novelty in man's religious journey. The life of a believer begins to be understood as a vocation, thus as a calling, as the place where a promise is fulfilled. And he moves in the world not so much under the weight of an enigma, but with the power of that promise, which one day will be fulfilled. And Abraham believed God's promise. He believed, and he sets out without knowing where he was going. Thus says the letter to the Hebrews 11:8. But he had trust. In reading the book of Genesis, we discover that Abraham experienced prayer in constant faithfulness to that word, which periodically appeared along his path. In short, we could say that in Abraham's life, faith becomes history. Faith becomes history. Indeed, Abraham, with his life, with his example, teaches us this path in which faith becomes history. God is no longer seen only a cosmic phenomena, as a distant God who can instill fear. The God of Abraham becomes my God, the God of my personal history, who guides my steps, who does not abandon me, the God of my days, companion in my adventures, the God providence. I ask myself and I ask you, do we have this experience with God? My God, the God who accompanies me, the God of my personal history, the God who guides my steps, who does not abandon me, the God of my days. Do we have this experience? Let us think about this a bit. Abraham's experience is also attested to in one of the most original texts of the history of spirituality, the memorial of Blaise Pascal. It begins like this: God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers and savants, certitude, feeling, joy, peace, God of Jesus Christ. This memorial, written on a small parchment and found after his death, sewn inside the philosopher's clothing, expresses not an intellectual reflection that a wise man like him can conceive of God, but the living, experienced sense of his presence. Pascal even noted the precise instant in which he felt that reality, having finally encountered it the evening of 23rd November 1654. It is not abstract God or the cosmic God. No, he is the God of a person, of a calling, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, the God who is eternity, who is feeling, who is joy. Abraham's prayer is expressed first by deeds, a man of silence. He constructs an altar to the Lord at each stage of his journey. Catechism of Catechesis 2570. Abraham does not build a temple, but scatters the path of stones that recall God's passage. A surprising God, as when he pays a visit in the form of 3 guests, whom Abraham and Sarah welcomed with care, and the 3 announces the birth of their son Isaac. Genesis chapter 18, 1 to 15. Abraham was 100 years old and his wife was more or less 90. And they believed. They trusted God, and Sarah, his wife, conceived. At that age, this is the God of Abraham, our God who accompanies us. This Abraham becomes familiar with God, even able to argue with him, but ever faithful. He speaks with God and argues up to the supreme test, when God asks him to sacrifice his very son Isaac, the son of his elder years, his sole heir. Here Abraham leaves faith as a tragedy, as a groping walk in the night, under a sky that this time is starless. And many times this also happens to us, to walk in the dark but with faith. God himself will hold Abraham's hand, already prepared to strike because he saw his willingness truly complete. Genesis 22, 119. Brothers and sisters, let us learn from Abraham. Let us learn how to pray with faith, to listen to the Lord, to walk through a dialogue up to arguing. Let us not be afraid to argue with God. I will even say something that may seem like heresy. Many times I have heard people say to me, this happened to me and I became very angry with God. You had the courage to be angry at God. Yes, I got angry. But this is a form of prayer, because only a son or daughter is capable of being angry at their dad and then encounter him again. Let us learn from Abraham to pray with faith, to dialogue and to argue, but always willing to accept the word of God and to put it into practice. With God, let us learn to speak like a child with his dad, to listen to him, to reply, to argue, but transparent like a child with his dad. This is how